In Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. Today is Tuesday, the 8th of March, 2022. It has just gone 1 o'clock, and I really want to welcome you all at this virtual meeting via MS Teams. A special word of welcome also to our officials who will be assisting us and briefing us. The theme for today is a briefing on the subject of waste management, inclusive of organic waste and solid waste disposal sites. And we hope to learn more about the best practices, the sorting of waste, energy from waste, recycling options, as well as what the future may hold. And I think we all know that the handling and management of waste has become an extremely important field in our endeavor to try and lessen the impact and to see whether we can have more sustainability in what we do. So thank you very much. It's also the first time I believe that some of our members will be introduced or be introducing themselves to the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. I think some of them have already joined us when we met as an looking after the agriculture component of this committee's work. Just before I give the members an opportunity to introduce themselves, just to note that we've received the apology from Mr. Anton Bradel, the Minister of Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. My name is Andrikus van der Westhuizen, and it's my privilege to be the chair of this standing committee in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And with that, honourable members, can I ask that you introduce yourselves? If we can more or less go in an alphabetical order, you don't need to raise your hand. You can just unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Gillian Bosman, a new member of this committee.
Warm welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Lorraine Botha, also new to this committee.
Chair, I don't know if I'm alphabetically correct, but I'm Peter Marie, and good morning to all of you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. It's
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Oh, August is before me. Apologies.
Good. Much, honourable members. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Khalil Brinkhuis.
Yes. Welcome, Honourable Brinkhuis. Nice to see you as well in this committee. And I do hope that the wonderful turnout will give an indication to our officials of just the level of interest and support that they will enjoy.
Chair,
and now,
Chair.
Yes.
Yes, no, I've waited for the Honourable August to introduce himself because his surname comes before mine, and I'm not sure whether I've done so. My name is Pat Maran. I'm an old member of this committee. Good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. I did see that Honourable August unmuted himself. I don't know if you missed his introduction.
Afternoon, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Sean August.
Good, thank you very much. This is really a very good turnout, and it just displays the high level of interest in this topic, I believe. And therefore, I would like to give over to our acting HOD, Ms. Shippey. Ms. Shippey, would you like to introduce your team or give an opportunity for them to introduce themselves? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson, and to all of the members. It's wonderful to have you all in the room, especially for such an important topic. I'm going to hand over to my Chief Director, Environmental Quality, for him to introduce the team that he has brought today. Thank you very much. Gottlieb Arendse, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Corin. Gottlieb Arendse, I'm the Chief Director, Environmental Quality. And I brought with me my team, newly appointed Director, Waste Management. So, yeah, we are here to support him also in the presentation, but he will be giving you providing the presentation, as well as his managers, the deputy directors responsible for the various areas of waste management. So I'll allow Salim to introduce himself and then the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson and the rest of the members of the Standing Committee and fellow colleagues. I'm Salim Haider. As mentioned, I'm the Director of Waste Management at the department. Thank you.
Linda.
Can I just ask, is Ms. Langenhoven or Mr. McBain Charles also with us? Mr. Hoorn?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Belinda Langenhoven. I am the Deputy Director, Waste Policy and Minimisation. Welcome to the new honourable members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson and Standing Committee members. Lance McBain Charles. I'm with Waste Management Licensing.
You're muted, August.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson and the other Standing Committee members. I'm August Hoorn, and I'm representing the department as Deputy Director in the Waste Management Planning and Information Unit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe that those are all the people that we expected to attend this meeting. Also then a warm welcome to our support staff that make these meetings possible. Ms. Candice Morris from our ITC section, also Ms. Shereen Nikerk, and also Ms. Nomfundo Mshompelu, who help us to organize these meetings and who does the communication with the department. Thank you very much also for being here and for your work to make this happen. Ms. Shippey, would you like to make some introductory remarks before we give over to Mr. Haider?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And certainly, I think, other than the new members, we have had the opportunity previously to share some of the challenges that we have in the waste management sector. And I think it won't come as any surprise to you that we have enormous problems in terms of our municipalities not getting sufficient funds to deal with their waste properly. So the idea of being able to minimize the waste streams, so try and reuse materials, to try and upcycle things, so make them into other useful items, becomes a very important topic. And of course, the removal of organic wastes means that we have a lot less waste to deal with across our municipalities, but also that organic waste creates some very potent greenhouse gases. So it's also able to aid climate change, to reduce our climate change impact by actually removing that organic waste. So our teams have been working on this for a number of years, but I think it's only recently that we've actually seen people paying enough attention to asking the right questions. So I'm very glad that we have this opportunity. And with that, I'd like to hand straight over, because I know how precious your time is and your members' time is. So let's jump straight into it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Hayder, while you will probably be flighting the presentation, I do note that this is an exceptionally long presentation with many slides. If I can ask you that we aim to finish the presentation at about 2 o'clock, 1400 hours, and then members will be given an opportunity to ask questions. So members, if I may ask that you rather write down your questions, and that so that we can let the presentation flow, and then hand over to you after the end of the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Hayder. You may want to minimize my face now.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and thank you for the opportunity for us to present at this forum. I'm not sure if you can see my presentation that is up. Just let me know if it is there.
We do see your presentation in the background. I think if you press there on the minimize, correct? There you are. Okay. And now if you can perhaps put your presentation then in, I think, what is called presentation mode.
There we go.
There we go. Fantastic. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you so much once again. As I said, this is, as was also mentioned, this is quite a lengthy presentation, but I think the brief we were given just shows how broad the aspects of waste management is. So I'm going to fly through this and may not sort of stop in detail on many of the slides, except maybe for a pertinent few, but it's in the hope that a lot of the members had actually gone through the presentation. But if not, there's going to be time for questions and discussions at the end, and we will gladly go back to any of the slides that you feel we need to maybe spend a little bit more time on. So thank you for that. And I'm going to start immediately so as not to waste any more time. Firstly, I think it would just be very appropriate if we could maybe just pause for a second and just close our eyes. We unfortunately lost Simon Mbata, who was actually the sort of chair of the South African Waste Pickers Association last week, unfortunately killed in a car accident. Very much the driving force in for the recognition of waste pickers in this country, who's doing an admirable job and assisting in terms of trying to reduce the amount of waste going to landfill. So if I could maybe just ask everyone just to close their eyes and maybe just pause for a few seconds in memory of Simon Mbata. Thank you. Thank you. Just to go through the contents, I'm just going to touch on the State of Waste report, just some of the planning and governance issues within our department, then the impacts of changing legislation and what it has led to. We will talk a little bit about the buffer zones and development as well. And then, mainly focusing on COVID and what was the impact of COVID, amongst other things that we had struggled with in the waste management sort of sector. There's quite a few slides on the solid waste management costing model, and this is from the City of Cape Town. Now, I mentioned the City of Cape Town because about 70% of the waste that's generated in the Western Cape comes from the city. And it's quite interesting to see where the sort of costs goes in terms of waste management. We'll touch on some of the waste minimization initiatives that's been undertaken to see what can be done to reduce the waste. And then I'll give a little bit of a background in terms of what the circular economy is and why we need to transcend towards the sort of circular economy. And then lastly, we'll touch on gender mainstreaming. And talking of gender mainstreaming, may I also take the opportunity of wishing all women well on this International Women's Day as well. Just the vision, I think what we see in the slide is this is really what we're all striving towards and what we want to achieve. And this is really what we foresee all communities in South Africa to have, is to have this sort of environment that is clean And whenever there's waste, waste is actually just a resource that's in the wrong place. In fact, so much more could be done to that material we don't like, but when used in the right and appropriate places, it actually generate energy or create jobs or lead to recovery. And we just need to ensure that waste is in the right place. Just some numbers to touch on. In terms of population, that's the sort of population increase that we've seen by 2020. It was about 11.8 in the Western Cape. Quite a large number of migration, mainly to the greater metropolitan area, Saldanha Bay coastal or metropolitan area or larger Saldanha as well. And then, of course, also the Southern Cape coastal belt. More than 2 million tons of general waste was disposed in that year. Waste removal collection system in the Western Cape was seen to be roughly 95%, and with a diversion rate of waste from landfill of 23%. Also good to note is that 68% of organics that was generated was disposed of at landfills, and then 30% of the municipal waste stream is organic in nature. Those were some of the quantitative issues. Then in terms of the qualitative issues, also good to note that there's quite a lot of waste streams that's now banned from landfilling. If one looks at the date of 23 August 2021, we're looking at liquid waste, tire waste, and there's a whole host of waste streams that's since been banned from going to landfill. Also coming to the fore was the norms and standards for separation at source, and it is expected that by 2023, 50% of households would have or could be participating in separating at source. And then, of course, the separation at source needs to be integrated and form part of the integrated waste management plans of municipality and must also feature in their bylaws as well. Organic waste is going to form a big challenge, and it's also where the key focal point is over the next few years, because we need to ensure that 50% of our organic waste is diverted from landfill by the end of this year. And 5 years later, 100%, a complete ban of organics to landfill by 2027. So a lot of this would form part of biological treatment, and there we will need to see composting plants, anaerobic digestion facilities, etc., coming to the fore to be able to take up this volume of organic waste as well. I did mention that the waste model bylaw that we are providing municipalities assistance with could come in to actually ensure that there's some teeth in regulating this, and then also the provision for separation at source needs to come to the fore. The diagram that we see there just shows how integrated waste management is. And if one look at the sort of outer circle, that's really what one sees as a sort of a circular economy sort of principle that's driven from taking out the natural resources, leading it to production, consumption of products and services, people then discarding it. But instead of it going to a landfill, let's try and treat it, let's try and recover, let's try and use much more of it. And then, of course, just take that same treated material and use it back as your natural resource. That is there. So we don't become too reliant on the natural resources that's really got a strain on it, and ensure that we have as much reduction to landfill as possible by implementing sustainable consumption and also ensuring there's good recovery, collection and transport of the waste materials as well. This is just a slide depicting the sort of effective waste governance and partnership platforms. So if one look at the sort of vertical platforms, that would be the sort of governance platforms that's there. We've got regional waste management officer forums, which leads into the Western Cape Integrated Waste Management Officers Forum that we also have. And then any sort of inputs, etc., is then further taken up in terms of the MinTech working groups. For waste, it's working group 8. And this is just to ensure that whatever issues are discussed is also taken up and discussed at national level, so that we can have the actual flow from national down to provincial to municipalities as well. On the horizontal sort of leg, that is just some of the partnerships. So we've got the Western Cape Recycling Action Group, where we basically have quite a bit of interaction and partnershiping with a lot of the SMMEs, companies, and also the Producer Responsibility Organization, or PROs for short, that's there to actually lead the drive in terms of recycling as well. And then right on the far side, we've got the Industry Waste Management Forum. So there we speak to industry in terms of minimizing their waste stream, because that's where the bulk of the sort of waste really sits. So it's quite important to have these partnerships and collaborative sort of governance platforms in place. Again, just to add on to the planning processes, quite important to have planning at the forefront, and this is really where the municipal IDP sits. So the waste management plan, or the integrated waste management plans, is really a subset of the integrated development plan. It's about the generation behind, but it's quite important that it's properly aligned to that, and that municipalities actually utilize that in terms of their proper planning as such. From the Western Cape side, we have got our second generation IWMP currently in place, and we are now working towards the third generation, which should come in effect as from next year onwards. Then, of course, just some statistics in terms of what needs to be in place, more along the governance sort of setup. 84% is designated waste management officers, so 26 of the 31 are already in place. 67% of integrated waste management plans are in place. That's 20 out of the 30 municipalities. That figure dropped a little bit because those municipalities on the right-hand side in the block, those are all expired and needs to be reworked and redone. And then, of course, the bylaws, of course, also is in place at 25 out of the 30 municipalities. That's 83% as it stands. Again, these are just some of the sort of planning that has happened over the past few years. I'm not going to dwell into each and every one of them, but these are just some of the sort of initiatives that were undertaken. And again, these are the reports that has led from those initiatives that were undertaken. Again, as mentioned previously, the first generation integrated waste management plan was developed in 2010. The second one came to the fore in 2017, and these are normally valid over a 5-year period, and our next one is due by 2023. The first work of it has started already in terms of drafting it. And again, the sort of main vision is just to ensure that we have a resource-efficient society that ensures a clean environment, to try and strive towards those pictures we saw in the very first slide. Again, yeah, I'm not going to touch too much on this. Again, just to indicate again, the primary objective is to integrate and optimize waste management planning. You want to maximize the opportunities and minimize the environmental and financial costs to improve the quality of life for all. I'll skip this as well. Just in terms of integrated waste management planning, just to show how it has actually moved, we also need to make sure that we align ourselves with the National Waste Management Strategy. And the diagram on the left just indicate what the sort of key focal areas was to try and ensure that there is avoidance, then reduction and reuse, and then recycling of as much of the material, with disposal as your last resort. Unfortunately, that funnel was always the other way around, where everything has gone to landfill, and it's still very much like that. But the whole sort of theme has actually moving towards a more circular economy, because this actually makes a lot more sense, where we move away from a take, waste and dispose sort of method to try and ensure that a lot of the products and services are kept in the cycle for as long as possible. The following slide just gives a sense of what the sort of waste tonnages are and its composition. As one could see, that the municipal waste is actually 56% of what is actually received at most of our disposal facilities, and this is really what is really generated in essence. And split into commercial, industrial, organics, and also C&D is commercial and demolition waste as well. And that one could actually just see on the left-hand side what the trend has been over the past few years. The following slide just depicts what is diverted and what is disposed. So the sort of orange band is just what goes to landfill, and then the green portion is what is diverted. We'd like to see that green portion forming a bigger part of that circle or donut that is there. And it varies a little bit from district to district. But on average, one can see that we are at about 25% in terms of waste diversion from the amount of waste that's actually disposed of. So a little bit of a way to go still, but probably still better off when compared to the rest of the country. But yeah, doesn't mean we need to rest on our laurels. There's a lot of work that lies ahead. This slide is a bit of a one that is a bit of a concern, because the areas in red just shows how little landfill airspace we do have. In fact, these are all municipalities that have less than 5 years of landfill airspace available. And the green would indicate you've got more than 15 years of landfill airspace, and then the sort of amber or yellow portions that's there indicating City of Cape Town and Overstrand is somewhere between 5 and 15 years of landfill airspace. So again, this just depicts that we cannot be reliant on landfilling anymore, and there needs to be a complete change in how we handle our waste management. And those points that's listed on the left are just some of the initiatives that needs to be undertaken and taken seriously in terms of achieving that diversion target. Again, quite important that in order to make it work, bylaws need to be in place, and bylaws also need to align itself properly with the sort of Waste Act that is there as well. So at this point in time, 52% of these bylaws are well aligned, and 32% of municipalities do have bylaws, but it's not that aligned with the Waste Act, and then 16% do not have a bylaw at all. These are just the sort of compliance status of facilities in the Western Cape. So we can see that 2/3 are generally non-compliant in terms of the waste licenses and conditions that pertain to waste management and waste disposal. The 13% that you see there are mainly in the City of Cape Town, and I think it also includes a little bit of Stellenbosch and Drakensberg as well. But for most of the rest, picture can be much improved upon. We'll just touch on some of the reasons why we and what we pick up with these non-compliances. Again, it rests on budgets. When budgets are cut, there's less money for waste facilities as such, and also disposal costs has also increased significantly over the past period. There's not enough adequate resources to operate these facilities. There's a lack of proper infrastructure, and this picture here shows the sort of infrastructure that needs to be in place if one is going to run a world-class sort of landfill facility. And then, of course, the other problems we've also experienced are things like incorrect data information that is supplied. Sometimes coordinate points are not where it should be based on the license. So these are all issues that need to be tackled and rectified in order to achieve compliance status. From the infrastructure study that was undertaken, and I'm just going to touch on the bottom line, it's quite clear that the cost, there's a huge backlog in terms of the cost of compliance that one would need to achieve. So in terms of just complying, there's a 250 million shortfall for municipalities in the province to be able to just make sure that they can comply with the legislation that's there. And then when one looks at rehabilitation, this is after the site has been utilized, it's closed, and it now needs to be rehabilitated. There we're sitting with a huge, nearly 773 million sort of shortfall of what needs to be done. So these are all sort of monies that should have been put aside and allocated right at the beginning, which was never the case previously. And then in terms of just sort of infrastructure to ensure that there's a 20% diversion of the waste stream, that's about 300 million that's required for that. And then, of course, the cost of additional infrastructure that needs to be in place by 2030 is about 650 million rand. So in total, we're probably looking at about a 2 billion shortfall that's required for waste management that needs to be in place just for facilities to comply as such. Okay, this just once again indicates, now previously you may have seen the figure of 94.5. It's not that these figures were in the wrong places. That was actually in 2020, and the 2021 sort of assessment that was undertaken showed that the sort of basic level of refuse removal is currently sitting at 95.4% in the Western Cape. The following slide shows what the sort of status is of separation at source for the Western Cape, and this could be a little bit misleading, and I just want to clarify that. Although it may indicate that there's 2/3 of the municipalities apply a separation at source program, I just need to point out that a lot of this is still very much in sort of pilot phases. It's not run through each and every community that is there. So it just indicates that the number of municipalities that do have a system, but it's not an all-encompassing system. So yeah, the figure could well be a little bit misleading, but it just indicates that that's where we are in terms of which municipalities are doing it, but it's not at full extent. Because of the bans of organic waste that's coming to the fore, we've actually requested all the municipalities to indicate what their sort of organic waste diversion plan is. And to date, we've received 11 plans, and these are the sort of plans that have come in as to date. And that just indicates which municipalities had done that and is actually working towards achieving the sort of target. The rest must still hand theirs in. Again, this gives an update or a status of how much organic waste is actually generated and goes to landfill, and what percentage of it is actually diverted. And yeah, again, it's sort of a little bit all over. Some doing a lot better than others. And again, one can see the volume of just the metro city of Cape Town in terms of how much is actually generated and how much is actually diverted at present. So again, just to re-emphasize, it's 50% of this needs to be achieved by the end of this year, and 100%, a complete ban of organics to landfill by 2027. We're currently sitting at about 34% on average. So this is just some of the sort of technologies and alternatives that we've looked at. So anaerobic digestion is sort of one of the key things, and there's a facility in Athlone that sort of started off, I think, in 2017. Ran into a few issues where they're trying to divert as much of the organic waste streams as possible to generate energy and also biogas. So that is the sort of one component that's there. Composting would be another that could come to the fore and would need to be improved upon to take in all the sort of available resources that could come towards it. Then we'll see Inseco on the right-hand side, Inseco AgriProtein. These are all sort of companies that's looking at the black soldier fly technology. Issue around black soldier fly is these are not your normal household flies, but these are very sort of huge sort of flies. Main function is actually just to lay eggs, and the larva feeds and the adult reproduce. Now, the larva actually feeds off the sort of organic products, and this could be a good sort of source for feedstock, because once the larva is sort of fattened up, they then get dried and then they get crushed. And that's actually a good sort of alternate protein source where one would actually previously deplete the sort of fish stocks to get the sort of animal protein. This would actually be a good replacement for that as such. And then, of course, some of the pictures at the bottom, the bottom left just shows a typical sort of pyrolysis plant that's there, a schematic of it. And then we also see some of the plants for PPC that's there as well. Also, one of the sort of key future uptakers, potential uptakers of waste as such. This slide depicts the sort of policy instrument that's been developed over time. Again, it goes from healthcare waste, organic waste, abattoir waste, green wastes, the sort of development of model bylaws. So this is all what has all been coming through over a period of time, as depicted in the slide. I'm not going to spend too much time. One can just sort of go through that. Then changes in legislation has actually made it much more expensive for landfills to operate. I made that point earlier. Reason for that being that, A, with the new classification of landfills, it means that you need specific liners. These liners come at quite a price. And then also there's been changes to what the slope should be. So whereas 1 in 3 was deemed to be the ideal slope, it's now been changed to 1 in 4, which means that your infrastructural cost per waste that's actually disposed becomes so much more higher, which pushes up the price of landfills as well. Norms and standards was introduced to make it easier for stakeholders to get to authorization. And then, of course, landfill bans was implemented to create opportunities for private sectors to look at, what can we do with the sort of waste streams? Instead of burying it in the ground, what can we do to generate energy, get job creation, ensure that the product could be reused back into the market rather than just discarding it. Although this is great opportunities for the private sector, I think it becomes a little bit more challenging for municipalities who need to ensure that they actually have the sort of infrastructure and logistics in place to be able to take on that responsibility. And then EPR is extended producer responsibility. This really shifts the focus away from, so when a product is produced or manufactured, where does the responsibility lies once it's purchased and used? It no longer goes away from the producer or manufacturer. They need to ensure that when they produce material or even import material to this country, that they take full responsibility for ensuring that that material is can be reworked, can be sort of reused back in the system, and that very little of that can go to landfill sites. So this is really part of the new sort of legislation that's come to the fore. Buffer zones, quite important to note. Most of the facilities do have buffer zones that's sort of indicated on it, but with the sort of growth within the province and also the demand for land, buffer zones are often impacted upon. And it's not uncommon to get the sort of phenomenon where structures need to be put in close by to disposal facilities. Which can be highly problematic. Problematic in terms of the buffer zones are there for a reason. It's a scientific determination to ensure the health and safety of communities around it. And secondly, you also get much more complaints in terms of odors, smells, or any sort of issues that may come to the fore. That one would then need to spend quite a bit of time on to try and get resolved. And also sometimes companies would invest quite a bit of money to set up their facility in what should be an industrial zone, only to find a residential complex coming up right abutting to them. So these are some of the challenges that we also face. Let's talk a little bit about COVID. We know what the COVID issue was, but within waste, various sort of coordination and platforms were sort of created just to check on all the municipalities and ensuring that the waste services could still continue as per normal. It's an essential service. It became a bit of a disrupted service during this time period as well. But yeah, various platforms were put up, technical support, surveys were undertaken, and also one of the hardest hit was actually waste pickers and the sort of much lower socioeconomic parties involved with waste management, particularly during the hard lockdown period, where a lot of them actually suffered as a result. Again, just looking at the trends of healthcare risk waste that was sort of coming through. Seems to correlate very well with the sort of peak of the COVID periods as well. So we're looking at sort of peaks coming through in terms of healthcare risk waste that was sort of coming to the fore in the sort of June, July period of 2020. Then there was a spike, a bigger spike in December, January of 2020, 2021, and that sort of tapers off again as the pandemic sort of also tends to recess as well. Just the impact again of COVID. Quite often with collection crews, you have a staff member that's infected, and then the entire crew will have to be in isolation. So it really had a huge impact on the resources of collection of waste. Also, with regards to plant and fleet and collection vehicles, a lot of this breakdown, and because of lockdowns, because of infections also at suppliers, etc., and service providers, there was a huge sort of delay in trying to get these equipment back on board again. So that also led to issues with waste collection. And then, of course, the wine and the sort of hospitality industry was also severely impacted with the lockdowns of lockdown 5 and lockdown 4 respectively. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because particularly on those two industries, it had an impact on the sort of glass industry. So those recyclers that were very much dependent on glass found out that recyclers were not, and I'm talking about the bigger recycling companies, were not taking in any more glass because of the inability to actually recycle it and sell it off into these sort of industries. So yeah, the bans and the impacts of the industry also had a huge impact on the waste industry and those dependent on it. And then, of course, with the lockdowns, waste pickers and buyback centres, they couldn't really operate. There's no other sort of form of income. And this was the way they eked out a living, and it became extremely difficult for them. At the bottom, I've also indicated some of the other sort of, let's call it disasters or diseases and issues that came to the fore. Avian flu, swine flu. There was also shipping disasters, and then also much lately was the sort of red tide issue with the crayfish walking out. We don't have a direct impact on it, but we are always, we are part of the sort of partnerships and play a coordinating role in terms of assisting those departments that carry these mandates as well. Just touching on the costing model of the city of Cape Town, as mentioned before, the city accounts for more than 70% of the waste stream in the province, and I think it's quite important to note the following slides just in terms of where the cost really goes in terms of waste management, what the real costs are, and what they need to budget for to be able to deliver these sort of waste services as such. So from the budget, 86% is really operational costs. That's the day-to-day running of providing a waste service. And then let's say 14% of it is for your capital costs, and that's to ensure that there's new infrastructure or replacement infrastructure that is put in place. Again, when one look at the sort of city budgets, these are huge numbers, and you can actually see that we're talking about 4 billion for your operational budget, and then 661 million for the capital budget as such. So this table just gives a breakdown in terms of where this cost sort of sits and what they would need to budget for, and why the cost of waste management is actually where it is. So yeah, it's quite expensive just to keep waste facilities operational. Again, yeah, this just gives a breakdown in terms of where the sort of operational budget is sort of broken down into, what proportion is repairs and maintenance, employee-related costs, bulk charges, finance charges, etc. One can just go through that in more detail. And again, yeah, breakdown and the split of where the sort of OPEX budget within the collection side of it sits as such. Quite interesting to note here that in terms of the number of compactors required to provide the service within the metro, there's 123 city-owned fleet that's out there, and then of course 38 contractor fleet. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of that own fleet was severely impacted, and they became very reliant on contractors to come on board and assist. And it was not uncommon to have services even on Sundays coming down the road. And again, if one look at the number of lifts per week, it's nearly 900,000 of those lifts that take place on a weekly basis. Again, I'm not going to touch much. I think one can just sort of have a look at it, and then yeah, maybe just look at what does it cost per lift. In other words, every time a truck comes to you to lift and pick it up, we're probably looking at about 32, 33 rand. That's what the cost is just to lift one garbage bin as such. Again, waste minimization is a very sort of important concept that we need to embrace. The waste industry itself is estimated to bring in about 15 billion rand. That's what's lying there. There's the ability to employ about 30,000 people, and we can unlock a further 17.4 billion per annum's worth of resources. And this is by doing just a few tweaks. In other words, reduce the sort of industrial waste stream and household sort of waste stream and try and recover as much of that would actually bring about quite a lot of savings, and also could lead to much more jobs that could come from it as well. Most of this is actually in post-consumer waste, and 90% of that post-consumer waste is actually what the informal sector tend to work with. and great opportunities with that. And I think it's important because of the whole EPR and extended producer responsibility that's coming to the fore. This is really where the partnershiping is going to play quite a big role in terms of ensuring that, you know, we've got a better sort of dialogue and connection between all parties in the waste sector. And yeah, it has also been estimated, and these are figures that we got from the CSIR that had a look at what the impact of the waste pickers is to the economy. And yeah, total is 700 million rand in landfill airspace savings. Now, the municipalities don't fork out a cent towards that. This is really what they recover and what they prevent from going into the landfill sites. Again, SMMEs, they've got a number of challenges. Again, it's issues like recognition, being able to access the waste. At this point in time, a lot of the contracts and things are written where it's very much favored towards the bigger sort of operators and very restrictive to them. They also need land to be able to effectively work on, operate on. Otherwise, they would also be non-compliant or don't have the access to it. And again, municipal contracts, as mentioned previously, it's very much geared towards the sort of bigger contractors that's there. Issue around risks is of course one of the reasons why it's like that, but these are areas that would need to be addressed to make the playing fields a little bit more level going forward. And again, yeah, we want to ensure that there's good service delivery. We need to address the issues around poverty, unemployment, and inequality in the sector as well. Yeah, again, it's just elaborating a little bit more about what we've just spoken about. Importance would be around beneficiating the waste streams, making sure that there's a demand and supply for it, and that also parties have access towards these sort of waste streams that's there. And those would be the key sort of components that one would need to look towards going forward. Again, a lot of training is required, capacity building, support, particularly around the sort of collections sectors as such. Separation at source, as I mentioned earlier, is actually only done in certain sort of pockets or within certain communities. Again, one would need to look at the cost of it, and also there's quite a bit of awareness raising to be able to inform people properly as to how to go about this. And these are some of the things that need to be undertaken. Following hard on its heels is, of course, the organic waste that would also need to be source separated in the not too distant future. And so there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of ensuring that that comes through. The department is also assisting wastepreneurs in ensuring that, you know, they run more efficient waste recovery systems, and that there's also access to the waste stream. So a lot of that is done internally as well. We've touched on some of this before. One of the key things that's worth mentioning is the promotion of regional cooperation of waste management services. I think that is also key and crucial moving forward, because yeah, without that, everyone would really be struggling. And then, of course, waste information system. I can't emphasize that more. It's important for this department to ensure that it gets good quality information, because the information needs to, or the data leads to the information, leads to the knowledge, and that, of course, help everyone in terms of planning properly going into the future. Yeah, so we're looking at building cases for alternative waste treatment as well. In other words, getting away from the sort of landfill. Landfill is still very much in the picture, and as you've seen, up to about 75% of the waste is still going that way. And we need to look at better ways of treating and benefiting our waste source as such. So there's a lot of drivers that need to come in play, such as costing models, tariff systems, that needs to also align itself to be able to assist this whole sort of drive away from landfilling towards waste minimization as well. Yeah, and I think important to sort of facilitate these sort of networks. There's at this point in time just too big a a divide between the municipal sector and the private sector. We need to start working together because, waste doesn't sit in the one sector at the exclusion of the other. We need to make sure that, everybody is responsible for this waste stream and try and build upon that going forward. Otherwise, we're going to lose this war on waste. One of the sort of key things that we're looking at to try and incorporate is actually one of the sort of circular economy models, and this could be one of the sort of case studies we're going to take on, and this is to try and support the sort of repair and refurbishment sector. Quite often, and this also leads or links up with the EPR system as well. If you buy a cell phone today or a radio or whatever sort of electronic product, quite often these things are designed to just last for, let's say, maximum 2 years, because they want you to obviously purchase the next upgraded model, and then the entire thing gets thrown away. But if it could just be that a small component could actually just be taken out, replaced, repaired, etc., a lot of the sort of material could be saved from disposal going into the future. New jobs and more upskilled jobs could be created in the sector as well. Rather than people just continuously picking, you'd be able to build these sort of new skills that come with it as well. And I think the support for the SMMS sector is there, and these are just some of the platforms that's there through the CEDA, DDAT, and other agencies as well. And we need to ensure that we do our utmost to try and promote these sort of sectors as much as possible. Then just some fiscal support that's there to assist municipalities as well. We've seen the backlog of infrastructure, etc. This department has also developed tools to try and assist them. And one of the sort of funds that's this sort of come through is to actually assist or give to municipalities so they can have topographical surveys of the current sort of landfills undertaken, just in order to apply the sort of landfill sort of available airspace tool, so they can actually accurately determine how much of landfill airspace they still have and remaining, so they can plan appropriately and also know how that would need to lead to either new space, other sort of technologies that need to be applied in order to determine their own integrated development plan or waste management plan as such. Then again, a lot of the sort of emphasis moving on is actually more on if there's any infrastructure that needs to be developed, it needs to be very much citizen-centric. And then MIC funding that was previously exclusionary for fixed infrastructure is now also including mobile infrastructure. And I think that is quite important to note, because it also allows municipalities now to actually utilize MIC funding to purchase yellow plant and fleet like your collection vehicles and any other sort of landfill equipment that may be needed. We have also developed a strategy for illegal dumping. It was actually noticed that with the sort of, especially during the sort of COVID pandemic, when it was sort of very much heightened, that there had been an increase in illegal dumping. And I think a lot of this was also relating to the fact that waste services was impacted upon, as previously described, led to a lot of frustration and further sort of illegal dumping that took place. We need to break the scourge of illegal dumping, because it doesn't create jobs, etc. It's actually a waste of good public funds to go and clean up and double handle what could have been treated more effectively. So once again, important to look at how we can actually achieve a better sort of and clean environment by eliminating this scourge as such. As mentioned before, quite important to make sure that all plans align with the National Waste Management Strategy. So it's quite important that when planning of waste take place, that national, provincial, municipal is all aligned, that we do not lose that sort of focus, and that we get the right sort of messaging across, so that we can actually speak the language. And when it comes to funding, etc., it's quite important that these things are all properly aligned and to achieve the sort of greater goal that's there. Also important to note that within the National Waste Management Strategy, they've moved, and in their new sort of strategy, the circular economy is actually at the heart of planning. So That sort of issues should be coming through in all integrated waste management plans for the province and also for municipalities as well. I mentioned the issue around partnerships, and it's quite clear. Municipalities cannot do this job of waste management all on their own, especially with the sort of landfill bans of products, etc. That's they're going to become more and more reliant on partnershiping, particularly with the private sector, to be able to achieve the sort of clean environment that we're striving towards. I mentioned IS at the bottom. IS is industrial symbiosis. In the UK, it's actually mandatory for all companies, before they can dispose of any waste, they've got to actually show that they have considered all industrial symbiosis options before they can actually take their waste for disposal. So industrial symbiosis is just the concept whereby when one company sort of produces a waste stream, let's say it's offcuts from their production line, it's that same material, instead of landfilling, it could be the inputs of another company that could be reliant on that material, where they could actually be the uptaker of it and utilize that in their process. So the one company now saves on disposal costs, transport of the same material, and you've actually got a company that, instead of relying on natural resources, can actually utilize that in their system as well. I've received quite a few sort of call-outs in terms of aligning with rail as well. It seems like the appetite for waste to rail is back, and I think this is quite key and crucial in terms of waste logistics, to be able to ensure that instead of being road dependent, particularly with a sort of a high fuel cost that's there, and the limitation of what you can actually carry on road, to try and link up particularly more remote parts with where the actual centres are, disposal sites are, etc., and also where the opportunity for maybe benefiting the waste streams are. So waste to rail could play a more significant role as we move along. I'm going to go through the following a little bit quickly. Again, it's just that what does our current sort of economy look like? Very much linear. In fact, a study undertaken by UCT and the University of Bochum from Austria had indicated that South Africa is currently sitting at only 7% circular economy. So it's very much still driven by a linear economy. With a linear economy, it was obviously very much the basis for it was consumerism. Planned obsolescence, making sure things break within a short space of time so you can produce more, create more, and sell more. So it was very much profit driven at the expense of everything else. And the one mistake that they all made was, of course, they thought that it doesn't matter. There's always going to be resources in the ground that we can pull out and utilize. And once a product is done, there'll always be space to throw the product away. So we've seen that, resources are actually very limited. That's why it costs so much today. And landfills, as we could see in the picture earlier, was all red. We don't have landfills to keep throwing waste into. So this model is now completely knocked for a six, and we really need to start looking at moving in a more circular sort of side. Also, the impacts of all this sort of linear economy has impacted on not just the land, the air, but also the sea. And I think one important statistic that's come through is that by 2050, there will actually be more plastics in the sea than what one would actually find fish stocks. And I mean, that is a frightening future to contemplate. And yeah, that's basically what it has resulted in, a very sick world. And this slide just indicates where we're currently heading towards at the rate at which we are consuming and utilizing our goods. That red dot is actually where we were in 2010. And we had already gone over what the Earth's footprint was in terms of what this world could sustain. So if we go at the same track that we're going now, by 2050, we're going to require 3 planet Earths. Now, we cannot ask God for 3 planet Earths. We've got one. So we've got to make sure that we get back to 1 planet Earth. And that is the reason why we would need to change course, as that green arrow indicates, to be able to pull us back on track. Otherwise, we will be in a very unsustainable world with lots and lots more problems. So a lot of driving sort of forces need to kick in, and circular economy is definitely one of them. So This the three sort of bases of circular economy is you want to regenerate your natural systems, you want to design out waste and pollution, and you want to keep products and materials in use for as long as possible. So those are the sort of three tenets that the circular economy is really based upon. In summary, circular economy wants to see economic growth, but it mustn't be coupled with resource constraints. In other words, it needs to be completely decoupled from it, where you could actually, it doesn't matter, you shouldn't be dependent upon extraction of resources to drive an economy. It should happen by means of ensuring that you keep products in cycle for as long as possible. And this diagram just indicates what a circular economy is really about. So we're looking at feedstock coming in. This is your design and production. You use it. And then the shorter the loops, the more effective you are and the better your cost savings would be. So you're going to try and reuse your materials for as long as possible. And then if you can't reuse it anymore and it needs to be discarded, then it either needs to go, if it's a biological process, it can either go for anaerobic digestion or composting, so you can get some energy or soil nutrition coming from it. And then if that's not good enough and you've still got more discards, then that must actually go towards recycling. So quite important to note that recycling is really on the outer loop, not on the inner loop. So yeah, the emphasis really isn't on recycling, but on better product design and better product reuse that need to come to the fore. Just want to point out the difference between a Eurocentric circular economy, because the European market is very much dependent and pushing towards the circular economy, but it's important to note that their focus is going to be quite different to what we will have in Africa. So their main drivers is the fact that in Europe they don't have mines and natural resources, etc. So they want to make sure that there's a security of the resources. They want to make sure that the environment is protected, particularly for the tourist market that is there. And then, of course, the critical materials perspective is also important to them. In other words, they don't have, they've got very much finite resources, and they need to make sure that that is extended for as long as possible. In Africa, because of our sort of development sort of challenges that we've got, our importance is on citizens. We want to make sure that there's attention to social equity. We've had very much issues, not just in this country, but throughout Africa in terms of quality of life, and we need to ensure that there's a better quality of life for all. And of course, infrastructure. There needs to be infrastructure in place that matches and sort of promotes what we want to achieve and see. And then, of course, service delivery is key. We need to really have an improved service delivery in this space. And it's quite important that these are the sort of cornerstones for our needs. So in terms of implementing it, we need to make sure that we acknowledge and support existing practices. You can't just discard what is there. That will just lead to huge amounts of protests and killing off of current jobs that's there. But we need to transform it from existing to new. We've got to invest in natural regenerations. That is key and important. And again, the issue around better access to finance. I think it's quite important because of the sort of issues we've seen and the cost of needing to comply and what we need to achieve. We need to make sure that access to finance is there, and we need to promote collaboration. I think that is also important. And when I say promote collaboration, we're talking about intra-Africa and inter-Africa as such. Design, I think, is quite important. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just to indicate that, again, those three tenets need to work. And on the right-hand side is really what it is that one wants to achieve out of it. So you want to make sure that when you produce things, there's standardized components, so you don't end up with products where, the one component don't fit the other component, or your phone breaks, but your charger is different because you've bought a new charger. So this sort of non-standardization needs to be eliminated so that, we don't end up having to throw things away that still works. And that's really sort of the basis for a lot of this. And then just to indicate that the circular economy has got two distinct cycles. This is known as the butterfly sort of diagram. So on the left-hand side, what you see in sort of green arrows, that is how organic materials could be taken through a circular sort of process. And on the right-hand side is a sort of more the technical materials, your sort of hardcore tools, etc. This is really what how this would actually go through a circular economy cycle. Again, I emphasize that the shorter the loop, the more efficient you are. So if you buy a product, for example, and you maintain it, and I'll just put the arrow on that, so just put the arrow there. You can see this cycle is extremely short, but this will give you better value for money in terms of what you're purchasing. If maintenance run down and things need to, maybe it doesn't, you want to change it, then give it to someone else for reuse. So that moves into the next sort of cycle. And then if something breaks where you can't just hand it over, let's see if you can't refurbish or remanufacture the item. And if that doesn't work and the product needs to be taken apart because you can't use it in that form anymore, then maybe perhaps look at recycling so that it can be broken down into different components. But that will all keep things back in its loop. These are just 5 South African sort of case studies where this sort of circular economy has really come to the fore. The one is on circular supplies. This is really around industrial symbiosis, where huge sort of money saving and cost savings came to the fore. Then resource recovery, I did mention the black soldier fly industry. Agri-protein was one of them, which was a key component in terms of proving how resource recovery could actually foster the profitability of the business. Then the clothing bank is a good example of product life extension, where instead of particularly fashion companies, they tend to discard a lot of their materials and their waste streams once there's changes in fashion trends. They used to take it to landfill. So the clothing bank has actually seen an opportunity of actually getting these the bigger sort of clothing companies and retailers to rather move the waste to entrepreneurs, small scale entrepreneurs, who then sell that on the local market, and in so doing actually still keeps the products in use. It's nothing wrong with it. It's maybe just a change in fashion, but the basic needs of clothing would also be taken care of. Sharing platforms is also a means of a circular economy, and I think one of the best sharing platforms is actually Uber. When a person wants to go from point A to point B, that's your aim and that's your goal. The fact that you've got to purchase a car of 200, 300, 400, whatever amount of money it is, 1,000 rands, is really consequential. So do one really need to purchase and put an outlay of that on a car when your aim is only to move from point A to point B? And just think about all the sort of expenses that is there. At the end of the day, the car is also a huge sort of fuel guzzler, adds to climate change issues, etc. And it's electric, of course. So there's a lot more issues that go with it. Again, another example of sharing platforms. If one wants to hang a picture and you want to drill a hole on the wall, do we really need to go out and buy the drill? If you think about your own sort of household, how many times do you actually take the drill out of the drawer? So we only needed a hole. We didn't need the whole drill. So there could be other means within which to achieve this. And places like Charlotte in the USA, they've actually got libraries where instead of just going to the library and taking out a book, you can actually take out these sort of power tools, use it, return it, and in that way, again, you build a sort of circular platform that's there. And then the last one on the end is this product as a service. Again, ACA Threads, they make these cotton yarns, and they had this on huge sort of spools of reels. These reels were actually bought by companies, but then they don't have any use for it once the cotton is used up. So ACA Threads is actually put a new model in place where those spools belong to them. So it's a cost saving to the company. And instead of having to use virgin material to create more spools, they can just reuse their old spools again. So these are just some of the sort of key circular studies that had been done, and that's working pretty fine in this space. Again, the benefits around profit opportunities. You don't need to be reliant on sort of supply based on volatility of markets. There's new demands for business services like Uber has sort of emerged. And yeah, you get improved customer interaction and loyalty as well. That very last example I used, a lot of the clients of ACA Threads are very dependent on ACA Threads because they've got to return their product, and in that way you build a sort of customer interaction and loyalty as well. Again, this is just re-emphasizing the sort of figures that's there in terms of what could really be unlocked. And I did say that, if we can reduce industrial waste to landfill by 20% and domestic waste by 60%, that's where 17.4 billion rands worth of resources could be generated. And this is the study undertaken by the CSIR previously. Just remember that when we throw things away, there's a lot of embedded value in it as well in terms of the manufacturing, processing, using, marketing, distribution, etc. And this slide just indicates that you're not just throwing the product away, you're actually throwing a lot more away of embedded value that's actually captured in it. And again, from disposal sites, these are typical of the challenges that's there. And that's why we need to move away from landfilling as a means to an end. Again, areas that's worth mentioning is the African Plastics Pact. Again, they're not saying plastics is bad, but we need to rid the plastic pollution problem that's there. And there's 4 targets that they're working on, namely eliminate unnecessary plastics. 100% of the plastics needs to be reusable, recyclable, and compostable. Whatever plastics is taken up, at least 70% must be recycled. In other words, there must be a supply of at least 70%. And then of that 70%, 30% of every plastic product that's manufactured must contain recyclable material as well. So this makes sure that there's not just a supply cycle, but there's also a demand cycle to it. And then quite interestingly, on the 2nd of March, there's actually been the United Nations Environment Assembly had a huge sort of treaty that had been signed, and they had reps from quite a few nations and heads of state. And this happened in Nairobi, where they're looking at just ensuring that there's this treaty to attend to the problem of plastics pollution in the environment. And that needs to be in place by 2024. So quite interestingly enough, just in terms of plastics, in 1950, there were about 2 million tons of plastics in the environment. And in 2017, that 2 million has grown to 348 million tons. So yeah, plastics in itself is a 500 billion euro industry in the market. These are just some of the examples of where it has circular economies again come in quite useful. I'm not going to go through these examples, but yeah, again, lots of benefits to be taken out of it. And then the 3 sort of key areas where circular concerns is at the moment is on textiles, it's also on the organic waste, and also the e-waste that's there. And then I want to end off this presentation just to make mention of the gender gap analysis in the Western Cape. I think this is very important and particularly so much more so on today, which is International Women's Day, that whenever we do any sort of planning that we do consider this going forward. And again, it's quite there to emphasize that the department is quite committed to ensure that the gender mainstreaming happens throughout its mandates that's there. Again, the sort of statistics speaks for itself. There's gross inequalities between, very much a male-dominated sort of environment, and we need to address that as well in terms of, just some of the points that's put down there. Again, when it comes to waste management, it's quite interesting to note that women do most of the purchasing of products in the home. They're the ones that's more inclined to want to recycle and recover materials and make sure that, it's not part of the waste stream. And so they play a huge role within the sector as well. And I think, again, these are just some of the sort of issues that were picked up, gender bias, the fact that, women are given very much lesser sort of roles within which to play, unfairly so. And the access to capital and credit, I mean, it's disproportionately low when one compares that to the male sector. And I find it quite strange because they're actually better at managing budgets than their counterparts. And this slide indicates just what the sort of discrepancy is currently with regards to just within the employment sector in waste management. And one could see the only places where women actually tend to dominate is in the admin and the sort of contract or temporary sort of positions. But anything beyond that, it's very much male dominated as such. And this also stems through to the waste picking sort of sector as well, where they too face the same sort of discrimination. Again, their safety is at risk. Just the way infrastructure, etc., is put out, it's not very much favoured for them. Quite often, there's not sanitary facilities that's put out for the male. Just go there, stand against a tree, and you could relieve yourself. Women don't have that sort of. They won't be able to do the same thing. So it actually leads to further problems and issues for them. And if one just looks at the very last one, they end up with, sorry, not this slide, but with the next slide. It actually leads to quite a lot of, let's say, urinary tract problems, etc. So they're much more at risk and much more vulnerable, just due to simple little things that is not sort of focused or put in place to make their lives a lot easier as well. And then again, when they are part of the sort of waste fraternity, their hours is frequently decreased due to their reproductive and social roles. And remember, they actually got a double job. The second job they don't get paid for, which is really looking after the households beyond their normal daycare job. And again, when it comes to accessing recyclables on the sort of landfills or areas, they're often bullied out of getting access to the sort of higher value goods. So yeah, lots of issues as indicated there. And then again, we need to ensure that everything is done in our powers to try and stem the tide of the sort of inequality that's there. And then just to indicate, the risks again that they're exposed to. We're talking about not just violence. They've got to often pair up just to have safety in numbers when doing their work. And then, of course, just in terms of reproductive and urinary sort of systems, they're very high at risk in terms of infections as well, based on the sort of field that they are in. That's all that I wanted to really present on. I know I went through it extremely quickly, but I'm open to sort of questions with the rest of my team from this point onwards. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Hayder. Well done. I think there's a microphone still on there. I wonder if you could just mute.
Just stop sharing.
Thank you, honourable members. It's over to you. You're welcome to raise your hands. MS Teams will show in the order in which you've raised your hands for questions, comments. We will have an opportunity later on for resolutions. I already seen and noticed the hand of Honourable Sean August. Honourable August, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Please indulge with me. It's my second time on the portfolio. I just want to mention a few things and maybe the official can respond. One is the separation at the source and the diversion of litter. We find, and it says the City of Cape Town has 70% waste disposal in the province. In the informal settlements in the City of Cape Town, we find containers where the households throw their litter bags in those specific containers. We do have EPWP workers employed to collect and clean up around the container. They do that for 2-3 hours in the morning, and that's done, and then they do it for an hour in the afternoon. Is there a possibility to engage the City of Cape Town where separation might be possible at that specific stage, because there's over 238 informal settlements within the City of Cape Town, and that would make a huge change in the litter that goes to the landfill sites. That's the one thing. Secondly, in terms of the wastepreneurs, I think he used the word, how do we cut the red tape for them? What special incentives can we give them? Maybe perhaps a reduction of rates, reduction of something, an easier red tape for more wastepreneurs to be established, especially around the landfill sites. Then thirdly, our MFMA says that only one bin can go to a household, especially when it's an indigent household. We do have almost 900,000 bins in the city of Cape Town that's being collected on a weekly basis. But then we've got a lot of backyarders within these areas that these households only gets one bin, but we've got 4 or 5 families that fills that bin on a daily basis, then goes and dumps it. The city spends just over 2 million rand per annum to clean up that waste. What interventions does the city have, and what plans are in place that we regularize these dump sites so that we can also ensure that the separation there as well, to create some spaces for these kind of dumping of the bins. Then waste pickers, especially at the landfill sites. He's mentioned, the official has mentioned about the waste pickers, both the trolley brigade and the waste pickers at the landfill site. But the safety of those waste pickers at the landfill site is a huge, huge problem. I've been extensively exposed to the landfill sites, being the portfolio chairperson in the city of Cape Town with regards to solid waste. And engaging with those landfill sites, there was never an interest, and we visited those sites to register them as EPWP workers. There was a very low interest because most of them doesn't have ID books, etc. But also our engagement with the education department, if possible, that the children during school holidays and after school actually goes to those landfill sites and also does, they call it land mining or mining, and to perhaps have some education around that. Just bear with me quickly. Then lastly, especially Vissershok, we find where Vissershok is a lot of exposure of the whales and wet products, expired products, etc. Now, SA Breweries, for example, goes and dumps their waste expired beer, and they dump it with the bottles. Is there a possibility one can have an engagement for recycling too? We also find that a lot of frozen foods are dumped at Vissershok, where their refrigeration has maybe gone off at certain parts, but they dump the whole consignment because they do claim it to insurance. Perhaps if there's a possibility, and maybe Chairperson guide me, we might be able to do it in the resolutions, is that they have a survey and some inspection at the Vissershok specifically to see where we can divert more of those goods being thrown away at Vissershok. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable August. I do hope, Mr. Haider and your colleagues, that you are able to copy all these questions. With that, I give over to Honourable Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I'd like to know which municipalities in the Western Cape have domestic recycling in place, and also what the plans are for domestic recycling to be rolled out across the province, and also if the department has any information about the pilot that the City of Cape Town ran in terms of members of households being able to dispose of organic waste at the 5 pilot sites in the metro. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then next in line, Honourable Mbara.
Thanks, Chair. Indeed, a lengthy presentation. I'm not sure how much time we have to deal with it. But Chair, let me start. If you can remember, Chair, and yourself and the Mayor of Saldanha were caught off guard, and you were actually surprised when you've heard about the sub that will dump waste 250 kilometers away from St. Helena Bay. And at that stage, Chair, we have basically asked the question whether it backs. It's an issue that we have constantly raised about the Environmental Commissioner. Chair. And now we have received a presentation that speaks actually to this problem and how problematic it is. Chair, over the last 2 years, and I can recall there were 3 municipalities whose waste plants were actually on fire. The one was Swellendam, Breedeville in Worcester, and also Tulbach in Witzenberg. And at some stage, basically, we have asked posed questions, and we were told that criminal charges have been laid against those municipalities. So we want to understand, Chair, in terms of that, how far are the department in terms of that, whether those investigations have been completed and whether people have been found guilty, because it speaks of a lack of security also at those particular plants. Chair, back to this presentation. It was said that in 31 municipalities, only 26 waste management officers has been appointed. Now, I believe it's a responsibility of the municipality to appoint those officers. What's the reason why the other 5 has not been appointed, and what is the department doing to assist the municipality to make sure that all of them are appointed? That's the one. Secondly, Chair, we've been told now that out of the 30 municipalities, only 20 have basically plans to deal with the issue of waste management. The other 10 have expired. Again, the question begs, what is the department doing about that, and how will they assist municipalities to make sure that the waste management plans is in place? Also, Chair, and we have at the beginning heard of these presentations, the lack of support to municipalities to deal with the issue of waste management. Can it be that some of these issues, non-compliance issues, is one of the reasons why municipalities struggles to get support in terms of that? Chair, also the integrated waste management bylaws. It was said 70%, 25 out of 30 municipalities do have basically waste management bylaws. But Chair, the problem is, which is the problem? The problem is that only 50% are aligned, Chair, with NEMWA. 32% are not aligned, and then 16%, as I've said, don't have even a bylaw. How do we as a province ensure that, one, to make sure that the bylaws, because bylaws gets approved by the province, bylaws are in line with your NEMWA. Secondly, to make sure that you do have a bylaw that will deal with these particular issues, Chair. And again, Chair, and I've seen, if you look, for instance, at the city of Cape Town, this is a costly exercise. Chair, for instance, if 1 bin to lift 1 bin is 37.50 and 1,200 lifted a day gives you an estimate amount of 45,000 rand, for 45,000 rand a month. It's a very costly exercise, Chair. And again, I'm saying, Chair, doesn't it backs for the environmental commissioner to be appointed to make sure, to investigate and to make sure that these type of atrocities don't happen, Chair. And also, Chair, the issue of fishing companies and those smells, Chair, that's been released, and how would impact on our diversity, Chair. It's problematic. It's problematic for our communities. I think the environmental commissioner should be appointed. I also think, Chair, that based on the advice from this committee, the Premier will make a decision whether to appoint, follow a process to appoint or not to appoint. So I think, Chair, it ultimately lies with this department to make a recommendation when it comes to these atrocities that speaks to waste management and the problems that comes with that. Let me stop there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Maran, and over to you, Honourable Brinkhuis.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, yes, to the department, if I can get an update on the sewage plant in Zandvliet. Currently, there's upgrading taking place there. I went myself for oversight there. and witnessed the upgrading of that the solid waste storage plant there. And over the last few years, a lot of dangerous effluent was pumped into the nearby river there in the Zandvliet area, the Kuils River, and the community there was harmed very, very much. For that reason, there was some upgrading taking place over the last year now. So if I can just get an update that how far they are in completion of that upgrade to that facility. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Brinkhuis. Over to you, Honourable Botha.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Through you, Chair, I'd just like to know, in regard to the COVID period, the lockdown period that we have gone through, I just want to check how was waste pickers supported, if they were. And then in regard to illegal dumping, because we still see the illegal dumping in communities as we drive around. Now, I want to know, in whose domain is it to police this? And I want to know whether maybe during this financial period, what was the kind of, or some of the fines that was imposed, Chair, on illegal dumpers? And what was the rand value, if they were fined in rand value? What was that amount? What did that amount to? And then in regard to the department, what is the kind of awareness programs that the department embarks upon in communities in regard to waste management? Thank you.
Thank you. And then Honourable Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I think I will limit mine to a few because there's a lot of questions already been asked. But I just want to ask the department, I've listened very carefully to what they've been saying. Are we not too much dependent on human efficiency instead of creating good systemic governance? Instead of depending on people, why don't we just enforce compliance? We're already enforcing compliance on businesses in terms of their wrapping, plastic or paper. If people are comfortable with littering and they're comfortable living amongst filth, like I see every day in all townships, how can we get them to compost their green waste? And what is green waste? Are you going to take potato peels also and onions? Because I don't think that will be acceptable. And the poor don't eat lettuce and all those fancy greens. They don't have that on their diet. And mostly potatoes and then onions. So just you can answer me on that. And then that is why 66% you say is not compliant. So enforcement is a great issue here of regulations. You also mentioned flies as a source of food stock, maybe a lot of proteins in it. What is your long-term solution to flies? You're going to breed flies to create protein? Would you consider a waste tax? Because the people who sell the stuff, the packaging, that becomes waste. He makes the profits and he makes more boxes and he makes more paper wrapping to put their Omo and all this stuff in. Are you prepared to say government should look at the waste tax? You say it's 33 Rand to lift or pick up one garbage bin. Do you know that these people don't collect iron and wires and steel. You have hundreds of people who live on the streets carrying these iron and parts, spare parts of cars to scrap yards. Why don't they carry this waste to a waste scrapyard? Why don't we just try it? I did it when I was Minister for Local Government. I tried it in Kayamandi, next to Stellenbosch. And that place was full papers, plastic all over the show. And I made an experiment and say, okay, anybody who collects it, the dirt, and put it in a black bag, and we prepare to reward them R5 a bag. Hey, within 2 days, people were fighting over dirt. They hid the dirt in their houses. The officials told me, scared somebody will take the papers they collected because they're keeping it to come and hand it in and get rewarded for it. Is there some sort of reward in your scheme for people who put their stuff in a separate bin and bring it? Not we collected R35. They must bring it. You'll see these people with all ShopRite trolleys picking up papers and dirt and bringing it to our collection depots. I just want to ask another question. The Athlone Towers, which the city decided to implode, that's no more. That would have been very, very suitable to use all this landfills that is suitable as fuel. And that fuel could have produced steam. And that steam could have turned the turbines to supply hot water to our hospitals and clinics. Do you think it was a mistake to implode the Athlone Towers? And then I just want to finally say, globalization, sir, I can't agree with you, the presented. Globalization is on its way out. People are realizing they must be dependent on themselves, countries. Globalization is not going to work, not after Ukraine. Everybody look after himself. So we will have to find a new model around that. And I don't know how gender-based violence slipped in here, because this is supposed to be about environmental issues. I hope you don't think men are disposable. Are you saying men should stay at home and look after the kids, and the women must be employed and we must be unemployed? Just something with tongue in a cheek I want to ask you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Marie. Honourable August, I see you've raised your hand. Is it one of your existing points, or shall we keep you for a second round of questions?
Chairperson, I can wait for a second round, no problem. I thought you're doing one round and it's finished, and then the official is going to respond to it.
I trust there will be an opportunity for follow-up and a second round of questions. Mr. Hayde, if I could just add, and I'm grateful that Honourable August raised the issue of multiple households on one earth. It seems to me as if our current model for municipalities and the determination of waste removal policy was still based on the one family per service point model. And as Honourable August has pointed out, we now often have 4 or 5 families, and that one 240-litre wheelie bin sometimes is not enough. Yet, although the truck only comes down the street once, the second wheelie bin is often charged at exactly the same tariff as the first one. Do you believe that is the best policy? And secondly, do we have best practices for the waste removal in informal areas and areas with numerous backyard structures? It just seems to me as if we go around some of these areas, as if, littering and particularly the dumping of waste seems to be an enormous problem. And I do know that in some municipalities, they come in with these, I think they call it JCBs, big tractors with that lift up waste, and put it into big trucks. Once they've really formed into mountains of waste in some of these areas. And then second question, you have started very early on in your presentation, where you've said that we're actually running into trouble with our future of our landfill sites. What is the department doing? You've now correctly identified the problem, but what are you doing to rectify that and to ensure that we will have the necessary landfill sites registered and authorized in time? And then lastly, on the topic of the waste pickers, and I think you can probably combine numerous questions that dealt with them. I do understand that you say they're often criminalized, etc. I do see in my neighborhood that the companies employed to collect back or bring back the trolleys to our supermarkets, that they actually sit outside the neighborhood and waste for the waste pickers to confiscate the trolleys that they use. But I do find that in this neighborhood, where we do have separation at source of recyclables, that the waste pickers are actually then picking the most valuable waste, and the buyback centers only collect, the brown cardboard, etc., whereas the waste pickers would already have gone through and picked up or separated or sorted the stuff into what they want, which seems to be the glass, the plastics, the metal. So perhaps if you could just help me, what do you propose the policy to be when you first put out waste on the pavement? Who should be the owner, and who should then have control over the picking of that or the collection of that waste? And with that, Mr. Hayder, I do know that there are quite a number of questions. I do hope you could keep up, and I do hope that some of your colleagues will also be assisting if you find that the questions came a little bit thick and fast. Over to you, Mr. Hayder.
Thank you so much for the questions, Honourable Chair. Yeah, I'm actually very pleased that these questions came thick and fast, because it shows the interest in this field that's there, and also the challenges that's there. In terms of the response, what I'm going to do is, because I've got our deputy directors here with us as well, and each of them specializing in various sort of components, from waste minimization to policy and planning to licensing, I'm going to ask them to actually come on board to answer some of these questions, mainly because they've obviously got a much longer sort of span at the department than myself, particularly going back to the historic side of it, and to maybe, just answer these questions, and then I will come in if there's any gaps or anything that may be left out from their side. So I'm going to call them up to answer some of the questions, and some of the questions came from the different honourable sort of members that's there, but I'm going to try and group them in that sort of format. So we'll tackle the issues around wastepreneurs, waste pickers, policy and minimization. And I'm going to ask Belinda, Belinda Langenhoven, if she could maybe start first to answer some of the questions pertaining to that. Belinda can just let me know if she's maybe missed any of the questions. I made a note of each and every one of them. We'll try to as it came out, and we'll tackle it from that basis. So I'm going to ask Belinda maybe just to put on her microphone, and just let me know if you did manage to catch all the questions. If not, I can maybe just pick up the ones relating to waste pickers and minimization and policy. Thanks, Belinda.
Thank you, Ms. Langenhoven.
Okay, thank you, honourable members. I think the second question asked was around the red tape for wastepreneurs. And how do we work around the red tape to get them access to waste and to obviously operate more effectively? Am I right in that, in interpreting that question? I think it was from the honourable member, Mr. August.
That is correct.
Yes, so with the wastepreneurs, obviously we had a support program initiative for wastepreneurs since 2015-16. And it was a lot about them complaining about, the access, allowing them access to waste. As Salim mentioned, some of the key challenges that we had. So we as a department looked at what was the core areas that were the red tape, in essence, that was affecting them. And a lot had to do with bylaws. And so maybe this will also answer the bylaw question. And what we had then developed was a model bylaw, which we then promoted with municipalities. And this bylaw, so as mentioned, some of the bylaws are outdated. So we have an active campaign where we are engaging with all those municipalities who have bylaws that are not aligned, first of all, to the Waste Act, and secondly, to look at those clauses, the red tape and the areas that where they disallow access of waste to the wastepreneurs, because that is one of their key challenges. We also work very closely with municipalities and try and ensure that they create a conducive environment for the waste entrepreneurs. Just to give an example, in the Cedarburg area, the wastepreneurs, they were complaining that they didn't have, land, they couldn't function because they didn't have a space to work with. We then engaged with the Cedarburg municipality, and they have actually now, through their procurement system, they've managed to access certain pockets of land which they have now, which the wastepreneurs obviously had to apply for, and they can now utilize that land. And obviously we have then followed that up with our industry partners who are willing then to come on board and provide them with extra support for them to function. So in terms of the red tape, what we've also developed was a waste services procurement guide, and the main purpose of that procurement guide was to ensure that we show municipalities how they can put out contracts so that they can appoint more of these small and micro waste entrepreneurs instead of going for those bigger contracts, or where they do go for the bigger contracts, that they build within that big contract, they have mechanisms to allow for their local economic development and the incorporation of these small and micro waste entrepreneurs, and even to the extent of looking at how we can integrate some of the waste pickers into the system, I know I'm running around, but I think if I've covered that question on red tape. Then in terms of I think the fourth question there was on the safety of waste pickers. And the point was around the education, because on landfill sites there were children being observed and they come there in holidays, and this is unfortunately the reality. It's a very sad reality because of the economic downturn and the poverty in our country. Waste pickers actually see, the value of the materials that we citizens are just so easily discarding off in their bins, and that is ending up at our landfill sites. So a lot of waste pickers view the landfill site as a very valuable source of livelihood for them. And so you find the poorest of the poor being there. And so our strategy is obviously to work with municipalities that we get the waste pickers off the working phase, so we are really trying to promote a situation where municipalities either implement a system where we can incorporate them before the waste comes to landfill sites. But in instances where there are landfill sites, maybe where we can't do that, there are other alternatives where we can create a material recovery facility, maybe off the working phase, maybe still close to the landfill, but where we can then, in a very organized manner, we can try and incorporate the livelihoods of the waste pickers in a compliant and formal manner. This is not an easy task, and these challenges are really wicked challenges because we deal with all kinds of issues at the landfill site. The waste pickers There are a number of other social challenges like gangsterism, substance abuse. So it is by no means an easy task to do. But this is where we are at, that we are engaging with municipalities, and we're looking at their licenses and where they can show us that they are willing to have a formalized system where they can integrate the waste pickers. Then, of course, we also come on board and we provide the necessary health and safety training to the waste pickers, and obviously also how to add value to waste. So we provide all kinds of training programs for them as well. And as I said, the health and safety issue we also address. But it is a very unfortunate situation that we do find children at landfill sites, particularly at your coastal park area where you have a informal settlement and low-income areas very close to the landfill site. So it's quite easy for the kids to go there. But it's definitely not. It's something that it's more of a long-term strategy. But we are constantly engaging with municipalities to address that. Let's just see the next. I don't know if there's another waste picker. Just have a look. Okay, the question was around the separation at source and the fact that the waste pickers then have access to this, what we call a rich bag. That's every waste picker's dream, to have access to quality recyclables. And as I mentioned earlier on, what we are currently busy with is trying to also work with municipalities to understand that, you know, if you have an existing informal economy, it is being proven over and over that these waste pickers are diverting huge portions of huge quantities of waste, and then municipalities put a formalized system in place, and this is normally at the expense of the livelihoods of these waste pickers. So that creates, you know, a disruption. That creates criminality. It creates conflict, because now the usual access of waste pickers to this waste is now being diverted. So our answer to that, and this is what we're currently working with for municipalities, we're looking at assisting them in actually developing formalized waste picker integration programs. So the 4 municipalities that we are currently working with is our Drakensberg, it is Swellendam, it is Witzenberg, and the 4th one is Cape Agulhas. So we have appointed a service provider to assist them into developing their waste diversion system that incorporates these waste pickers into that. And part of this integration, as I said, would be for us to provide the support to the municipality, but also to the waste pickers. We are busy driving a program now where we are, one of the big things, and I'm sorry, the gender issue comes through all the time, whether we want to talk about it or not. I mean, just Drakensberg informed us that there was a problem with their women. They picked up that the women waste pickers did not have access to sanitary towels. Now, the issue of sanitary towels is a general one, and it is happening across the board, and that is probably why we need to focus on these gender issues, because we take away the not only the potential of females at school, and then we're looking at the waste pickers themselves. They have a difficult time because they are so poor, you know, to do their jobs and to be able to create livelihoods for themselves. So we are busy with an initiative to look at how we can provide these waste pickers with sanitary towels. So yeah, the gender thing is very much interwoven into the waste, and it's very magnified here, as well as mentioned earlier, that they are exposed. You will see the trolley, those ladies pushing the trolleys. You don't find so many of the ladies doing, because they are attacked on the road. So yeah, the waste, the gender issue is very it happens and we obviously also need to address them. Then I don't know if there were any other waste picker questions that I might have missed.
Sorry, Belinda, there was
Yes.
one. Sorry, there was one on the COVID period. How was waste pickers supported?
Oh, Yes, that's a very important one. So during the COVID, I think it was lockdown level 4 and 5, they actually prevented recycling from taking place because I think little was known, and we had I think it was a precautionary approach that was taken. So they were also scared of spreading the virus through the waste of households, and that is when they actually stopped the recycling. But what they didn't realize that this had a huge impact on this informal economy. Because even with the foreigners that are on the ground, that are because there's no entry barriers to waste picking, a lot of these people were destitute, and so the national department had then a waste picker support program, I think in partnership with the recycling industry, and they had then made funds available for a stipend. I think there were a few. Initially, it started with 200 rand, and I think this was rolled out about twice or thrice, and then there was a more substantial amount of, I think it was 945 rand. So we assisted our national colleagues by trying to document them, because it was important for us to identify, these who the waste pickers were, and document them, get the ID numbers where they had, and unfortunately there were many that obviously did not. The third phase with the 900 rand, we even accepted foreigners who had working permits to then also get document all that information on our database. And we also work very closely with buyback centers, with various waste companies throughout the province. And we then obviously assisted them in providing them with a stipend. But what they were also provided with was the PPE, protective gear. So this was also distributed throughout the Western Cape. Now we are still working on documenting the waste pickers, because we need to, in the Western Cape, we would like to understand the real contribution of them to the waste economy in the Western Cape, so that we can also plan more effective programs around supporting them and growing this economy without taking away any livelihoods. Yeah, I think I've covered that question.
Sorry, Belinda, there was also the last one from the Honourable Chairperson in terms of, just looking at this separation at source and waste pickers picking and getting the valuable waste. Buyback centres then end up getting less favourable waste. What sort of systems would need to be in place so that one get a good flow and good support base that runs throughout, which can then go from waste picker, buyback centre, municipalities getting the sort of benefits, and companies as well?
Yes, as I said earlier on, I think the important thing is to develop a waste diversion, an inclusive waste diversion system. I think, as I said in the past, municipalities would start their separation at source, and they completely disregard the existing informal waste economy, and that normally leads to challenges. When the waste is taken away, you rightfully say, the waste pickers then don't have access to them. The buyback centres who are then fed by these waste pickers then also lose out. So we really, we've engaging quite closely with municipalities, especially through this integration initiative, to ensure that when they design the waste diversion system, that it's important that they include this informal economy into that waste diversion system. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Belinda. There were also quite a few questions on awareness and education and training. If you could maybe just pick up some of those and respond to that as well, please.
Okay, so the waste awareness initiatives, we have developed a waste awareness strategy, which was very closely aligned to the national waste awareness strategy, which focused a lot on waste minimization, the value of that waste is a resource, and then, of course, also the issue of littering and illegal dumping. So we work very closely with municipalities. We've done a lot of training around this. We've trained over the years all the national programs, the Youth Jobs in Waste, the YES program. Currently, there is another group of youth that was deployed to the municipality. So our department plays a very active role in capacitating these youth that are taken up into these expanded public works programs. And so we've we trained them. And then also what we've also done now recently is that we work very closely. We've developed a co-design methodology for working with communities to resolve some of their waste management challenges. So it is a co-design and empowering methodology. We've tested this with the Nelspruit community just past Beaufort West. Just to remind the members that Nelspruit, if any of you have parents who grew up in District 6 and in the 1940s and earlier and 50s, you would know that they were sent, many of your families might have been sent, put on a train and sent to Nelspruit because it was a TB colony because of the clean, dry air. And what was happening now recently in Nelspruit is that the community complained because people were burning waste and they were receiving a very poor service in that particular area. So they reached out to us and we agreed to take them through a process, a co-design process with municipal officials, with various representatives from the community. So we are currently in the design process. We have started out with an awareness initiative with the community so that they can understand what are the waste management issues. And from there, we worked on a strategy of really getting to the root causes of some of the reasons why you have people are littering and dumping. And then we'll sort solutions. So currently now we are busy taking a committee through a process where we are designing various initiatives within that community. And the exciting thing is that the community themselves came up with the solutions. So there's real ownership of the challenges. And we know that funding is a huge challenge at this moment, and it's going to get worse, as mentioned about the Ukraine issue and just COVID just had a really bad effect on the economy. So the idea is to work with communities and design a system, a waste management system with them. So, and I think that is winning off the battle that the big municipalities and communities co-design so that we find that we have a more positive outcome at a less expense to the municipality and to communities at large as well, because ultimately they have to fit the bill for that.
Thank you, Belinda, for your inputs on the pickers and also awareness and education drives. I'm going to call upon Lance McBain-Charles next to answer quite a few questions that were posed with regards to waste licensing, non-compliance, and maybe just to respond to quite a few questions that were based on that as well. So Lance, if you could maybe just step up and maybe just respond to some of the questions. Thanks.
Good afternoon, honourable members. I think I'll start off with some of as the questions were asked from Honourable August and Bosman and so forth. And if I do miss one or two, I will ask Mr. Hayder if he could just refresh my memory if I miss one or two. So one of the questions that were asked was around the household bins, and sometimes there are more than one family that live on one particular house, and they only have one bin. The challenge there is it's around the way the municipal tariffs are structured, and this in order to get any more bins, the house owner needs to pay for the bin essentially in the tariff model that's associated with the city. And there may be similar models in other municipalities within the Western Cape. The other challenge that is also within these communities is that because of the close proximity of the houses and the lack of paved roads and the distance, you cannot get the refuse truck or the rear end loader into the informal area. So people now need to take these bins with the waste to a central area, or they even just dump it illegally. Yes, it does escalate the cost of cleaning up. So the challenge is not only a waste management challenge, it's also a social development challenge. And and social development and housing. So if there are more formal sort of structures available and there's more space to get vehicles in, the vehicles can come and more people could then get bins. What also happens is that skips are put in centralized locations within the informal areas. But there are many challenges associated with skips as well, in as much as the younger and smaller children who are responsible to dispose of the waste just throw it next to the waste. Children also have the tendency to intentionally set some of the waste alight for various reasons. So those are also challenges associated with skips. So essentially, it is around the pricing structure and the tariff. So for every bin that is out there, the house owner needs to pay for that service. Then Honourable August also mentioned taking children and doing things such as land mining and education at landfill sites. This is a challenge. All landfill sites have licenses or permits, and we try to keep people off the site as much as possible due to various reasons in terms of health and safety, and also the responsibility of the license holder should somebody get injured or die on site. Those are big challenges. It would be ideal for possibly a site visit at a well-regulated site and in small groups, because it is an active. Usually these facilities are active. They are huge machinery, and to have kids on site is always a challenge for site visits. So ideally, maybe if a video would be made for that could educate kids, and it could rather be a classroom activity. There needs to, in order to get anyone on site, we need to ensure that all personal protective clothing is available for various sharp and dangerous goods that are possibly on site. And also there's a chance of catching foodborne illnesses if children were to pick up anything on site. So it's really a challenge. It would be a challenge to take school kids to a landfill site, and ideally that should be in a classroom environment. With regard to the disposal of the whales and the expired beer and all of the frozen foods, we do once again also respect the challenges associated with food, health and safety, as well as companies' reputation. And if anybody were to get sick from a particular brand, it is a terrible tarnish on anyone's reputation associated with the product. And so Vissershoek is one of the Vissershoek. There are two Vissershoek sites. Firstly, the one is a private site, and then the other site is Vissershoek City of Cape Town site, and they are in close proximity, and they are both hazardous waste disposal facilities. And they still have landfill airspace available under the old licenses or permits, which allow them to dispose these types of waste at the facility. There are challenges associated with the new environmental legislation associated with waste that is limiting certain types of waste and animal carcasses and all of those sort of things to site, but that's based on the new developments on site. So there are also initiatives where food banks as such have been established in consultation and with some of the bigger brands, and maybe my colleagues can give everyone some more detail on that. But I am aware that that those food banks are there. But remember, not all the food that is available is always safe for human consumption. And that is always the challenge associated with that. And hence, we are now looking at organic waste diversion plans from these facilities and looking for alternative treatment for all of these organics. So anaerobic digestion and a number of other potential composting, to name but a few. There are a number of other methodologies associated where the waste can be valorized. And so the compost can be made, energy can be coming off from the processes, and fuels can also be made from these processes. Just moving on to some of the questions, and if I missed any there, Salim, you can remind me. Just on Honorable Bosman, you asked a question about the 5 pilots within the metro. So from my knowledge and understanding that there were 3 food waste drop-offs at Kalani, Woodstock, and Hout Bay, and they're looking to sort of move forward with many of these towards the end of June. And then there are also initiatives at the Bellville taxi rank, as well as the Langa fruit and veg stalls, where the city are looking at diverting some of the organic waste from these areas and looking at alternative treatment for these. The city also has over 22 drop-off facilities that have where they have allocated contracts for the chipping of green waste, and that is your garden waste or your those sort of waste over and above the food waste, and that sort of helps with the movement. Instead of disposing of that at the landfill, that can then be used as a good compost or any mulch and in the agricultural industry. I think that was the question. And then to answer Honorable Maran, just on the matter around the disposal of the chemicals to the ocean off St. Helena Bay in December last year, our Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, specifically the Directorate Oceans and Coast, have been leading in this particular matter and dealing with international agencies and also NGOs around human as well as marine safety. And the best practices have been put in place, as well as monitoring of algal bloom, monitoring of marine animals and various species. And one of the areas that they would do monitoring is also just a simple mussel that's on the rocks. They would get a lot of information from that. So the Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Environment are currently engaging with the ship's agents to get that monitoring in place. And the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning are sitting on a joint operating committee, which meets every 2 weeks and there's also regular updates from the shipping's agent as to what is happening on the ship and what is happening from the ship. So at this stage, just over 2,900 tons of waste have been disposed of at Visseshoek, which is transported by truck. The waste is put in skips and is transported by truck. And the combination, some of the waste that's taken out of our hold is covered with sand. So the volumes may be bigger than initially anticipated, but the sand is used there to neutralize the waste, and so it doesn't blow off the truck. So the volumes are slightly larger, and all of that is disposed safely at the private waste disposal facility, and it's being managed by a private waste disposal trucking company, Spoltec. Just on the matter around the fires, and yes, there have been numerous fires over the last few months. December time is summertime. The temperatures are extremely high in many of our areas, and some of these fires occur because of glass on site. They can trigger the spontaneous fires, which is also associated with methane gas. And you'll find that some of these fires may be extinguished today, but because of the extreme heat that it's burning underground, the water just evaporates on top. And so very specialized machinery is needed. And one of the members mentioned the TLB previously, which is the tractor loader backhoe. And those are sort of, you dig into the waste, they add water and they add sand, and then they keep digging and keep adding the water and sand to extinguish these fires. Not all the municipalities have the equipment or the availability of potable or water. There's more concern around potable water. So a fire is not the most favorite thing on site. And there are a number of challenges associated with extinguishing these fires, as some of these fires can burn underground without even being, there's no smoke, there's no indication of a fire burning until it reaches the surface. So, but however, as part of the license conditions, the municipalities need to report these fires. They need to ensure that they extinguish the fires. There have been no people, the question was, has anybody been found guilty? Nobody has been found guilty because it's always a challenge. Sometimes there is intentional arson on site, and these people usually operate at early hours or late hours of the night, and they make these fires to extract metal or whatever it may be from sources. And then because of the landfill gas that's present inherently in most landfill sites, these gas burn. And if you ever, if you light gas and methane gas, you don't really see the flame, and sometimes it's a blue flame. And so it's very difficult. So covering those matters, I think, and then the next question, and was a question by Honorable Brinkhuis, which was relating to the Zandvliet waste water treatment works. So there may have been an environmental impact assessment process associated with this. Previously, the department, in terms of waste management, would manage these facilities, and the thresholds there would be between 2,000 and 15,000 cubes per day, or above 15,000 cubes per day. So those are 2 million liters per day. So that unfortunately has been taken out of the Waste Act, and it's now managed under environmental impact assessment process. And also the Department of Water and Sanitation are the lead agency. Waste management do not deal with wastewater treatment works in that manner. So we can follow up and establish what the cause of concern is there, Honourable Member Brinkhuis, and we can get to assist you with your questions around those specific at Zandvliet. Moving on to Honourable Marais. One of the questions that Honourable Marais has asked was around the suitability and why those twin towers the twin towers in Athlone have been demolished. They were a structural hazard, and the city is also planning to do a number of alternative, how do I put this? They're planning an alternative hub at that particular site at the Athlone Waste Transfer Station. And due to the derelict nature of this facility, it was demolished. That old power station is still there. The infrastructure is still there, just that those two towers have been imploded. I don't know if there are any other. Oh, then the other question that came through from the last member. There was a question around what is the department doing about the licensing of these facilities and how are you getting them registered? There are a number. Essentially, if you go back to the presentation of Mr. Hader, you'll note that there are only 1 or 2 municipalities that actually have more than 8 to 15 years of landfill airspace. The department is looking at regional cooperation as well as regionalization. Currently, Swartland have a facility that acts as a regional facility, as well as the Overberg district, Kaapstad. There are other district municipalities that are looking into this, the West Coast, Garden Route, and also Central Karoo, where the siting of a reasonably located facility is in the pipeline. And then, of course, the city of Cape Town are challenged. The city has been challenged for the last 20 years for various reasons. And now they need to restart the process of siting that regional facility that was initially between Atlantis and the Kalbaskraal site. So essentially, I hope I've answered all your questions on the landfill sites. And one other last thing that I'd like to add is that the provincial minister and the national minister have been in consultation, and there's where the transfer of the Class B waste disposal facilities are now with the provinces. And this allows provinces now to be able to issue licenses for Class B waste disposal facility. And there's a small aspect of hazardous waste that's attached to that. Previously, the provinces could issue a license, but unfortunately, the facility couldn't dispose of the hazardous component of the license, the waste. Thank you, honourable members.
Yes, before you go, there was just some other questions I think that you should also just give a little bit of feedback on. This was around fishing companies and smells, how to handle that, and then the issues around illegal dumping, because I believe the strategy is within your portfolio. Maybe just to elaborate a little bit about the questions around illegal dumping, whose domain is it, what fines have been imposed, and just shed some light on that. Thanks.
Currently the department are busy with an illegal dumping strategy. The actual it falls within the domain of the municipalities who are on the ground that need to manage these sites. Some of the fines that are associated with illegal dumping range between 500 Rand and 5,000 Rand, because some of them are spot fines. It's also a real challenge to actually find the perpetrators of this. Once again, we need to catch the perpetrators red-handed. We need to, law enforcement needs to be there. Many of the perpetrators are people that live in informal settlements. One of our colleagues have a camera facing an empty piece of land opposite his house, and he's seen on numerous occasions how the waste is being dumped, but unfortunately, we cannot do something until we catch the person red-handed. So the domain lies with the local municipality who need to clean up, and we are very much aware that the city of Cape Town runs into hundreds of millions of rand for cleaning up illegal dumping, and that's also so it is a big challenge. But we're looking at not necessarily a silver bullet, but we're looking at the synergies and commonalities to see how, in the strategy, how municipalities can use the constructive and the appropriate methodologies from other municipalities and how they can implement it within the municipalities. Coming back to the odors around the fishing matters. In most cases, it may not always be the waste that is associated with the odors. There are industries on the West Coast that render the protein and make fish meal. So those are challenges. Those are serious air quality and emissions challenges that we have a challenge with, as well as some of the industries such as oyster breeding and those sort of industries on the West Coast, where the wastes associated with this are just pumped into the ocean, and there's no organic waste treatment plan in place. So the bays, which are usually enclosed and quiet bays, are fouled up with the organics and causing putrefaction. And so that is a challenge. So looking at the organic waste treatment methodologies and as well as composting norms and standards that are in place. This will facilitate some of these industries to put composting or organic treatment methodologies to play, which may not require a full licensing process, and all the applicants need to do is comply with norms and standards for the treatment of these waste streams. When it comes to the illegal dumping, just going back to that once again, I think the challenge there is that we can go out, and our Department of Environmental Affairs can go out in terms of waste management, establish what the challenge is in terms of illegal dumping, but we need to still refer the matter to the competent authority, who is the local municipality, who have the trucks, who have the manpower, and can implement the cleanup. When the municipality does not comply, we then take law enforcement action accordingly. Salim, I'm not sure. And then, is there anything else that?
I think that's the bulk of what I'd like you to comment on. I'm just going to call in August Wynne to just tackle a lot of the issues around the waste statistics, the planning and governance side of it. If you could maybe just answer some of that, and then once August is done, I will hand over to Gottlieb just to give a little bit more of a high-level sort of response to sort of remaining questions, or just to put it into a bit of a perspective thereafter. Thanks, Lance, and maybe for August just to step up. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, but can I just point out, unfortunately, we have about 13 minutes still for responses to questions. I know there were some members that wanted to ask follow-up questions or second rounds of questions, but this meeting is only scheduled until 4 o'clock, and we still have some committee business to deal with as well. So please, if you could try your best to manage the time so that we finish this round at 20 minutes to 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think what I will do is maybe just pass directly on to Gottlieb Arendse to maybe just answer some of the higher level questions on, and also some of the statistics presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Salim. Through you, Chair. Yes, honourable members, I think maybe just to cover the municipal planning aspect regarding the stats around waste management officers and the plans. I think the 26 municipalities which have waste management officers, this usually occur when people resign and we need to, the municipality need to designate waste management officers. So it's a coordinating function which is in the Waste Management Act, and there's also the Provincial Waste Management Officer, and it looks at the whole issue around cooperative governance and aligning strategies and policies, as which Mr. Hayder then informed us. The issue around plans, yes, again, it is not so that the plans are not those ones which need to renew or revise their plans. It's not that the plans are completely, not of use, but it is again about aligning to the national waste strategy, the new national waste strategy, the provincial plan which we're working on. So it's again in terms of how do we move forward. So there's still very much valuable actions within those plans, but it is about revising on a 5-yearly basis, as what the Act mentioned around integrated bylaws. Yes, again, also it's about revising the bylaws so that it is aligned to the new thinking, the new provisions in legislation and in plans. And so, yes, we do need to work hard on getting those municipalities to have their bylaws in place, and the mechanism which we use to get these things done, other than the licenses, is through the plans. So municipalities, when our minister endorse these plans and council approve it, we do make recommendations, August's unit, and then obviously through the management, that we make recommendations of what needs to be improved, and that they would need to then take up in that further before it's finalized. Just overall on the Zandvliet issue, just further, I want to say that according to the Water Services Development Plan, remember, this is obviously, as Lance indicated, not a solid waste issue, but a wastewater issue. So according to the city's Waste Services Development Plan, the status currently it is that the project is overdue, and that it's under construction. So that's the latest on that. With regard to odors, also from air quality, Lance have indicated also there's air quality issues. So our air quality management directorate has been advocating in the Mintech working group too, driving this very hard to advocate for a hydrogen sulfide standard, because that is the odor which we are talking about from fish products. And so we are looking at the source when it's on the boats, the trawlers, etc. Are they managing also in terms of the fish they bring in, not keeping it long, and so forth. So these again managing at the source, the whole aspect to reduce the odors, which then further gets taken through the process. Yeah. So just then the overall. Mr. Hayder was then elaborating on the integrated waste management system, which the country adopted in 2000 and through our legislation, which we have the National Waste Act. So this whole integrated approach, but we're looking at the systems and this whole circular approach. So it's important to keep that in mind, what we are demonstrating, how the various components is actually need to work with each other. You cannot be looking at it just on one aspect of the components. So if you, for example, take informal settlements, the nature of the informal settlement is different to maybe a formal settlement. So you need to look at what transport is applicable to that to get the waste out. Can you use people in the system? So it's not just a blanket approach to when we're looking at integrated waste management. It is about the systems which is best aligned to manage that, and obviously in terms of minimizing or avoidance and reducing waste from the start, product or in the productions and after post consumption of waste. So that's what municipalities and industry and also citizens need to look at how we fit into this whole systems approach, because that's what waste integrated waste management is. It's about that whole system and how the parts work together. So with that, thanks to the members for engaging with us on this important matter, and we look forward to further engagement with the new members going forward this year. Thanks, Chair, members.
Thank you, Gottlieb. Maybe just one last point from my side, just to answer a question by Honourable Murray, and that's, are we not too dependent on people, and why didn't we just enforce compliance? I think the issue is to try and use the carrot first rather than the stick, because it follows up to the next question. If people are comfortable living in waste, how can we change this? The issue that was tried quite successfully, and it was also alluded to later on in terms of the 5 rand a bag, was to actually incorporate swap shops. This was implemented in areas where I've been a waste manager before to great success. In fact, what we have found was that the areas itself became a lot cleaner. People put a value on waste. In other words, they didn't see it as waste, they saw it as a resource. And in fact, these swap shops, which occurred once every quarter, needed to be run every week, and they actually wanted it every day. That was the demand of people, because it actually resulted in, when they traded the waste in, which is now no longer waste, they actually got access to household goods that they would otherwise not have been able to afford. So it changed the whole perspective of people. It also made the area a lot cleaner. People didn't throw and dump anymore because they could relate to what they're throwing away as something of value. So I think that's quite important to note and pick up on as well. And the issue around the waste tax, a lot of these sort of fiscal instruments is actually currently sitting with the National sort of Waste Bureau, who's looking at incorporating a lot of these sort of measures within the sort of structures that we do have. It's quite a process, because yeah, there's quite a lot that needs to be structured in terms of how to sort of roll this out and delve this down and keep the sort of waste management, which is already expensive, at still an affordable sort of level, so we don't encourage further illegal dumping that could come with it. So a little bit of a chicken egg situation. But yeah, I just thought I would add that as well. I'm not going to answer the tongue-in-cheek question. I think we leave that for later. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hayder. Honourable members, I did see some hands. We've got about 4 minutes left. Any quick questions, one-sentence questions? Honourable Murray.
Yes, sir. I want to apologize, but also thank the department for coming back and answering 2 of my questions right at the end. I had to leave for a short while from my virtual meeting, so I wasn't sure whether they did answer it, but I was a bit ahead of some of the people, but they answered those people's questions first. So I wasn't sure whether they answered mine already, but I am reasonably satisfied with the responses. The rest I will leave, because I will have opportunities in the chamber once we get back to the House. So that is why I raised my hand, Chairman, not because I have any new questions. Thank you.
Honourable Murray, unfortunately, your signal has gone terribly bad, whereas we could hear you quite well earlier on. Yeah.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Thank you, Honourable.
Can you hear me now?
Honourable Murray.
Can you hear me?
Your network has gone bad. Honourable Murray.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to try again? We couldn't hear you well.
Okay, sir, I don't want to keep you up. If you can't hear me, then I will satisfy. I will sort of leave it at that because I can't get a signal.
Good. Yes. No, thank you very much. Thank you, and you're welcome to have a look at the YouTube video of this meeting. And if you've got any further questions, please submit them in writing. Over to you, Honourable August.
Chairperson, thank you very much. The official mentioned that he
Sure, we didn't button, so
30 rand for a truck lift.
But they don't show.
30 rand for a truck lift. I wanted to know, does that incur all the costs? And I think you mentioned it in the city of Cape Town. Does that incur all the costs from picking up the bin, disposing of the bin and all operational costs? Does it cost 30 rand or just collecting the bin? The reason why I'm asking is we as ratepayers in the city of Cape Town, we're paying 146 rand per pickup of bin. So if that's all the costs, then there's 116 rand that we are paying more. If you can just give a little bit more clarity for me to understand. Thank you, Chair.
Good, thank you. And with that, the last time, over to you, Mr. Hayde.
Thank you very much for that question. Remember, the cost was about 30 to 33 rand per lift, and that needs to be multiplied by 4.5 to be able to get the full monthly sort of cost. So it correlates quite well then with the 146. That is the collection costs that is built in. But remember, that is for one lift, and the payment is actually for a month. So it would be that multiplied by 4.5 on average. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Mr. Hayde, I want to say thank you very much. I think you could deduct from the number of questions and the nature of the questions that this is a topic that is very close to many of us, and that there's been a huge interest in this topic. I initially got quite a shock when I saw a 100-page presentation, but you did extremely well to go through all of that. And as you've said, we actually covered the number of topics in our request to the department to come and present to us. And preparing a presentation of that magnitude must have taken quite a lot of hard work. And we want to say thank you very much for everything that you've put in to ensure that we are all better informed, and that we are able, when we discuss this and when we are now going to formulate resolutions, that we are in a far better position to do that than before we've seen this presentation. So to you and the other officials, I want to say thank you very much. Ms. Shippy, would you like to perhaps just to have a parting word?
Thank you very much. And I agree with you completely, Chair. I think the number of questions as well as the range of questions definitely shows that this is a topic that needs to be discussed, and that there's a lot more work that we need to do as society, as government, but also, our entire sector, to be able to respond appropriately to waste management. So thank you very much for the opportunity. If there are any questions that members feel were not adequately answered, you're welcome to submit them in writing, and we will make sure that we then provide a written response. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Ms. Shippy. And as you heard, some of the questions went a lot wider than just solid waste. And thank you for being able and being willing to deal with those issues. They were obviously at the top of many of our members' minds. Thank you very much. You are welcome to leave this meeting as we will now go over to committee business, the formulation of resolutions, as well as the approval of previous minutes, etc. So thank you very much again, and we wish you everything of the best in your work. I do know that this has also been branded as requiring a lot of education in our communities, and be assured that from our side we will support all your efforts in that regard to ensure that people see the seriousness of solid waste management, littering, etc. So again, thank you very much. And you are obviously free to leave now. Honourable members. Thank you.
Colleagues. Bye.
Thank you. Honourable members, as I've
Thank you.
indicated,
Bye.
this now brings us to resolutions. And my apologies if I'm sounding a little bit rushed, but we are scheduled to have load shedding at 4 o'clock in my area. So if we could finish by the time as indicated on the invitation, I would really appreciate that. Please, will you by show of hands just indicate whether there are any resolutions that you would like, any issues that you would like us to take further? Please indicate now. I recognize Honourable August hands. And you please
Can I
unmute
go,
yourself. Please go.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So please guide me here. Chairperson, the presentation has not given us much of outcomes with regards to the waste picking and the interventions from the department side. They mentioned the interventions, but there's no outcome shown how far and how successful those interventions were. Maybe if it's possible, if we can get an update at another meeting, the waste pickers, what's the outcomes with the interventions, the wastepreneurs, then also the kids versus the education department and social development, especially close to the coastal park landfill site where they are busy picking at the landfill site, and then also a survey on the Vissershok. I know extensively there's quite some things happening there besides just the frozen foods being dumped. If they can do a survey and come back to us with that regard. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable August. As long as we phrase our question to them in such a way that we concentrate on the role of province. Obviously, we've got oversight over province and not over the city of Cape Town. But I do know that they set the limitations or the regulations. And so my second request would just be, can we ask that they don't come back necessarily to a next meeting, but that we first have a written response from the department. I'm just concerned that it might take quite a while before we are able to invite them back again. If that's fine with you, thank you. And then Honourable Bosman, your hand.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, the first part of my question around which municipalities have domestic recycling in place that's run by the municipality. If they could give us an indication of whether there are any plans for that to happen, and how does that look in terms of integrating into the general sort of waste pickers ecosystem, and whether that will alleviate the limited airspace available at landfill sites.
Good, thank you. Thank you for that. Can we also ask that we get an indication of the long-term planning for regional waste sites? I take silence always as concurrence. Any further issues that you would like to raise at this point? If not, can I ask that you submit in writing, and then we can also let this serve at our next meeting proposals for resolutions. We can also circulate them via round robin. But again, thank you very much for active participation and the interest that you've shown through the questions that you've asked in this topic. Thank you. Ms. Niekerk, if you would be so kind to beam onto the screen for us the minutes that we need to approve. That is the draft committee minutes of the 22nd of February 2022. Excellent. There they are. Now we've got a bit of a problem in the sense that quite a number of members, I think, did not attend this meeting as there are new members on this committee. But I do see a number of names of people that would be able to confirm whether these minutes reflect accurately what has been discussed and decided at this meeting. Ms. Niekerk, if you would be so kind to beam first page 1. Thank you. Then page 2. Thank you. And then page 3. Thank you. And page 4. Thank you, honourable members. Can we accept those minutes as an accurate reflection of our proceedings? Anybody that did attend that meeting?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Maran, and I can support that. I think we were both in that meeting, much appreciated. That meeting dealt with the agreement between the Western Cape Department of Agriculture and the State of California on the cooperation agreement that is to be signed later this month. So thank you very much for that. And honourable members, just a reminder that this committee expressed an interest in following up on this agreement once signed by perhaps having a study to the state of California to see for ourselves the agricultural practices in a region with a very similar climate to that of the Western Cape, a Mediterranean climate. So thank you very much for that. Honourable members, are there any issues that you would like to raise under general at this point in time? Can I then just say that I trust it's in order with you. We are moving into the budget. You all know about the sitting of the House scheduled for next Monday at 2:15. And then thereafter there would be a meeting of the budget committee to which, you know, all members are also invited, as we will probably be briefed on the nitty-gritty of the budget in that meeting. But then I have seen it fit to also schedule our 2 budget meetings, one on agriculture and one on environmental affairs and development planning, as virtual meetings. And I trust that would be in order with the honourable members. Good. And in the absence of any hands, I want to say again, members, thank you very much for excellent attendance at this meeting today. Also, as I've stated before, for the level of enthusiasm and the level of the questions that you've posed. And please feel free, if there are any further questions, to submit them in writing. And with that, honourable members, I would now like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, and I hope you will all have a great remainder of this afternoon and a great evening. Thank you so much, and my thanks also to our support staff for making this possible. Have a good evening.